What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. And guys, as training camps are starting to kick off, it's really starting to feel like fantasy football season, starting to feel like redraft season. And as we get towards the end of the summer, we actually pivot some of our drafts to be a little bit more boring, if you will. And I call them home league drafts. So just really your cookie cutter basic leagues, because that's what most people play in. But today's show is kind of special for me because it's not very boring, but it's still the home league draft. This is going to be the draft for my home league, a big 14-team draft. We're going to talk keeper strategy. We're going to talk big league strategy. We're going to have fun with it. If you guys have watched this show, you know I always tell you it's to help me get better at fantasy football, and that is what today's show is all about. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you on this Friday evening?
I'm doing great. It's been a long time, it feels like. Yeah. I feel like I've been on vacation from the show.
It makes sense. I was about to be like, it's only been 1 week, but it hasn't, because we were previously on Saturday morning. And then we took off the Scott Fishbowl show. And then I moved to Friday night and you couldn't make the first show. So this is the first time we've seen each other in probably 3 weeks at this point. So
yeah, it's probably the longest time we've gone with seeing each other since the season ended.
It's February. Yeah, because that was still only almost 4 weeks because we did the DFS show up all the way through. So yeah, the heart has grown fonder, Austin. I'm happy to have you back, my friend. Did you have a good time away?
Yeah, I was out. I guess you call it the West, Salt Lake City. It's sort of west. It's wester, but it's not. I don't call it
Hello West. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm in New York. You're in North Carolina. That is West, my friend. So.
It is West, but it's not the West.
Yeah. I think Utah is the West. I don't know. That's a debate not for this show right now, but that is speaking of West, as far west as Ohio, Stark County, Dan Metzgar, a good friend of mine. He does the show with us every year, and Dan is a part of my longest running league, the league that we're going to talk a lot about tonight. Dan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Before we get started, I do want to mention Dan, an avid Bengals fan. So we're going to get some Bengals talk in here. And Dan, also a very competitive fantasy football player. And I think I sometimes question, Dan, do you care more about winning or seeing me lose? But I think with you, it's very much winning. So
that's so close. So close. Yeah. I mean, if I'm not going to win, I have to have you lose. That's for sure.
Exactly.
All right, guys. A lot. So
that's the damn truth. Way too much. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and get this draft board up here, folks. As mentioned, it is a 14-team league. I thought we were going to have trouble filling this. You guys crushed it. This is one of my fastest filling leagues for a Friday night. I mean, it's my second league for a Friday night, but you guys filled up a half an hour early. So we have 14 people in here. Let me break down some of the settings after I go ahead and get the draft started. I'm going to mention all of our drafters right now because we have so many. And I'm going to remind everybody, if you're watching, it is a 30-second clock. Oh no, I made it back to 60 seconds because of how short the draft is. See, I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. But let's go ahead and talk about our drafters in the chat right now. Dame Overboard. I'm going to go ahead and start the draft while we do this. So we have Dame Overboard. We have Coach Trav. And then I didn't even turn sound off, Austin. I am doing just terrible these days. What is going on? Coach Trav from the 2 spot. Austin has 3. Shia LaBeouf at 4. Scripps at 5. Picadelphia at 6. Brocal at 7. Dan, you got the 8 spot. Index of Sus at 9. O'Brien at 10. Vince Mapstone, who is also in the chat, at 11. Say Watt again. Has been drafting with us for a while at the 12 spot. Our great friend Scampers also in the chat, picking from 13, and Duarte at the 14. Let me break this league down for you guys a little bit. So this is obviously a 14-team league. It is a PPR league, but I switched up the ADP to make it Dynasty PPR because not only do we have 14 teams in our home league, we also keep 3 players. We do not assign a round value to them. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about on today's show is about big leagues, 14-team leagues, but it's also about keeper leagues, something I don't think we've given a lot of attention to, and something I don't think I've ever talked to Austin about, how we feel about keeper versus just straight redraft. If you've never watched our show before, we are not going to break down every team. That is not the point of this show. At the end of the show, Austin and Dan will talk about their teams and if they had a strategy and if that strategy was forced to change. I will pick a huge mistake of the draft. We call it the oops of the draft. It's all in good fun. It's about helping people get better. But if you're here to see us grade your team, it's not going to happen. Sorry, it's just not what we're here for. I only set this league up for 12 rounds. We do very basic because we started this league 20 years ago and we really didn't know any better. So it's 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, a tight end, and then only 5 bench spots. But we also do a kicker, a defense, and we do a single IDP. I kicked the kicker, defense, and IDP out of this draft. So this is an offensive only focus draft. That was a mouthful. Let's start with some training camp news. Guys, Tua Tagovailoa got paid. I saw an interesting stat today that over his career, Dan Marino made $51 million. That is how much Tua Tagovailoa will make per year over the next 4 years of his deal. 4 years, $212 million. What I found interesting, Austin, is that Tua led the NFL in passing yards last year, but was the QB 11 in fantasy. Obviously, Miami isn't paying him to be a fantasy quarterback, but did we just see the best from Tua, and is the best he's ever going to be outside of the top 10 in fantasy football, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, probably so, because just of the sheer fact that he doesn't run the ball that much, if at all. He's really focused on, defeating defenses through the air. So I don't see him as like a great fantasy asset moving forward. If you're in a super flex league, he's totally fine. He's a great second quarterback to have, but in a single quarterback league, like he's going to, I would say he's going to have value in this league because of how many teams we have. But in a 10-team league, he may not even be starting on any given week just because he doesn't have the upside that some of those Russian quarterbacks are going to have.
I find it so interesting. You're stealing questions from me already. Will a large league make quarterbacks more valuable? That's a debate Dan and I have been having for years. Dan, you are a fan of an AFC football team. I don't remember your take on Tua when he was coming out. I was much bigger on Justin Herbert. And for a while, it looked like I was right. But now Tua gets paid. Tua leads the NFL in passing yards. How do you feel about him in fantasy football, Dan?
I stay away from him personally. He's too inconsistent. He does have big games. I'll give him that. No disrespect, but he just doesn't – he isn't consistently with having those top-tier quarterback numbers.
Dan, in regular redraft leagues, do you ever look for the stack? Because obviously like a guy like Tyreek Hill is very important when it comes to these redraft leagues, certainly in a 14-team redraft league. If you got Tyreek Hill, would that open you up more to having Tua later just to get the double points?
It really just comes down to how the draft falls. I wouldn't necessarily just force the issue and really focus in on Tua just because I have Tyreek Hill. For me, it would be more about, where the value is. If there are other value and I have to take a quarterback late, yeah, I'll look for that stack then if I'm doing that late, but I will not be looking for that right away.
Real quick before we move on, as I mentioned earlier, I used Dynasty ADP to kind of replicate the keeper aspect to kind of make the younger players a little bit more valuable. If you guys are looking to get better at Dynasty, make sure you check that ticker at the bottom of the screen. We have recently partnered with Dynasty Nerds, and if you sign up using promo code Club Fantasy, you will receive 15% off of your subscription. They literally have so many tools to help make you a better Dynasty manager, including the Dynasty Nerd Film Room, where you can actually check out all of the rookie film incoming. They have the Nerd Score. So many great things over there to help you dominate your Dynasty. Make sure you check out Dynasty Nerds. Make sure you check the link in the description. Use promo code Club Fantasy to save 15%. Dan, as I mentioned earlier, you are a Bengals fan. And I think a top of mind thing for everybody right now, and this is a loaded question because I think the answer is very different for the two players, is should we be worried about the contract situation for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? And I haven't paid much attention to Bengals camp yet. I assume you have. So what are your thoughts on your two big wide receivers as you come into this season?
I wouldn't worry about the contracts at all. T. Higgins has come out and said, he is focused on this year. He wants to have a monster year. He signed his franchise tag early. He didn't want to deal with the drama. He's there to play. He's there to win a championship. That's all he's worried about. Burrow's come out and talked about how much he appreciated his professionalism with that and his focus on this year, and has repeatedly said how he expects T. Higgins to have a big year. Jamar has been a lot quieter. He hasn't come out and said he's holding in, but it appears that is the case since he didn't practice the first 3 practices so far. The Bengals have talked about their plan is to get this done But there's also rumors out there that they want to wait till next year to really get it done, and Jamar wants it done now. So when you have guys holding out, you just never know. It is a worry because you tend to see those guys have the soft tissue kind of injuries when it gets into the season. So it's a concern from that, but at the same time, any one of your players can get hurt at any point. It's the NFL. Guys are always hurt. It's a physically demanding sport. I wouldn't worry about it any more with him than anybody else, but you do have that higher risk.
Austin, does it surprise you to hear a Bengals fan, and you guys have to take my word for it, Dan is tuned into the Bengals community. Austin, does it surprise you to hear him sound slightly more worried about Jamar Chase than T. Higgins? Because that is certainly not the sentiment we've heard at all this summer. Everybody is terrified to draft T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase had been going off the board as a top 6 pick in almost every draft we've done.
Yeah, I mean, it does surprise me. I would definitely need to do some extra digging into that because I haven't seen as many fears about Jamar Chase. But I feel like the deal is going to get done. It's going to get done now, or it's going to get done next year. It seems like the Bengals, it would be in their interest to do it now, because if they wait till next year, there's no telling how expensive that contract is going to be. But I have no worries about how it's going to impact fantasy. I think both of these players, they're going to be incentivized to play super well. So, it's not really changing how I'm drafting them. I wasn't taking Jamar Chase as a top 3 pick anyways, top 4 or 5, yes, but I don't think the contract situation is going to really change his ADP, and I don't think it should. I think there's a good chance, if the contract gets signed or he just plays this last year out and balls out and gets a bigger contract next year.
Yeah. I see my internet starting to give us some problems, so hopefully you guys can hear me and I'm not freezing up on you guys, and assuming that I'm not. I want to get Wendy's question up on the screen because it's kind of leading into the next thing I wanted to talk about with keeper leagues. And she was able to draft Tank Dell in the 18th round last year. Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, guys like that seem to fall very far in drafts last season. Should Tank Dell be her keeper? And Wendy, we would obviously need to know a little bit more about your roster, but he's basically free. So basically all I'm asking you, Austin, is go ahead and predict the Houston wide receiver room. Is Tank Dell worth an 18th round pick? I mean, that's an easy question, right?
Yes, he's definitely worth an 18th round pick.
Yeah,
at this point. Yeah, definitely would have him as a keeper. It again depends on how many keepers and all of that context. But if you're in a league where it's just like you pick 3, like why not go for it?
Let's dive a little bit into the Houston wide receiver room, Dan. Stefon Diggs obviously goes there. CJ Stroud with one of the best, if not the best, rookie seasons we've seen ever from a quarterback. I know it was somewhere up there. Great season from CJ Stroud. Crowded wide receiver room. Nico Collins. We saw Tank Dell play well before he was hurt last year, and now Stefon Diggs. They still have Dalton Schultz. They even added your boy Joe Mixon. Most assume Tank Dell is the odd man out of this offense. I don't think anyone's going to argue he's still certainly worth an 18th round pick, but do you also agree with the sentiment that he could be the odd man out in Houston?
I think he's going to have more inconsistency than what you saw last year. I think he'll still have his games. I think his speed and his connection with Stroud, like those two had built a connection before they were even drafted with Houston. After they drafted Stroud, they asked him, were there any receivers he told them to draft Dell. He and Dell have a good relationship. They have a connection on the field. I think Dell's still going to get some big games out of him. But obviously there's a lot of mouths to feed there. I know they're hoping to be more consistent in the running game, which is less opportunities as well. But I would still, for an 18th round pick, I would definitely keep Dell if you can.
Yeah, that's kind of where I stood as well. Is I don't know how that room's going to shake out. I have recently been changing my tune a little bit. I bought heavy into there would be an odd man out initially. I think if there's an odd man out, it could end up being maybe Dalton Schultz, or maybe they're going to use the fullback list. You have your 3 best players are your 3 wide receivers. You're going to get these guys on the field. Tank Dell has already proven he can play inside and out. Stefon Diggs actually excels in the slot. He just always isn't able to play there because he's the best player on his entire damn team. Usually, you could argue that might not be the case now. So I do find it interesting. So yes, Wendy, Tank Dell for an 18th round pick. Make that pick all day. But Austin hit a fact that I wanted to get to when we just talk about keepers in general. So Austin, for most leagues now, there's always a draft cost, like Tank Dell in the 18th round. When we started our league 20 years ago, we didn't really think about that. That was not clear to us. We didn't even know about dynasty leagues, any of that stuff. So we made it where you just kept 3 guys. In essence, it is your first 3 picks. I feel like that is, nobody likes that. What are your thoughts on draft cost versus no draft cost, Austin, if it's something you've ever even had to think about when it comes to keeper leagues?
Yeah, believe it or not, I have not actually had to think about this. But I will say, I think there is something to having the value aspect included. So what I have done in my keeper leagues is my home league was a keeper league before we transitioned to full on dynasty. And at the time it was a keeper league with a salary cap draft.
Okay.
So the players that you kept them at we were on ESPN at the time. You kept them at their ESPN value. They put out a value chart every year for all of the players based on how they performed in the previous season and their projections going into that season. And we would use that. There was like a $15 minimum, so that you couldn't just have a $1 keeper. You had to at least pay $15 for a keeper. And I think that created a really interesting element to it. Created a lot more strategy, because you weren't just like, oh, I'm going to keep my best player no matter what. Like, I'm going to keep Christian McCaffrey no matter what. You still probably would, to be frank. But when you're having to go ahead and sink, 20% to 25% of your salary cap into Christian McCaffrey before you even get to the draft, that's a much harder pill to swallow than getting a guy like Justin Jefferson coming off his rookie season and getting him at the minimum possible salary. So I think it leads to more strategy differentiation if you have the keepers actually have a value in the draft and you sign them to either a round, or if it's in a salary cap situation, they're kept at a certain dollar amount. But I do still think it's fun to also just have like a straight keeper as well. Like, if you're just dipping your toes into that, it's a great way to start, but it does kind of limit the types of strategies you'll have.
Dan, you and I haven't really talked about your feelings about it in many years, and I honestly couldn't tell you your vote one way or the other when we've debated trying to pivot to round value. What is your take? Let's talk just specifically about our league. Why should we keep our league as no round value? What's the benefit?
The benefit is our league is very stubborn, and I think half the league would quit if you made that big of a change to our league right now. We can't even get waivers decided. We flip-flop every other year with
After
that.
18 years, folks, we have gotten waivers to be passed. In our league, everyone has been a free agent from the second they were not signed to a team. And we called it fastest fingers, because as soon as the guy tore his ACL, it was a race to see who could get their backup as quickly as possible. After 18 years, we are now a waiver league, Dan.
This is like the exact opposite of my home league. I think we change rules every year. At least one thing is getting tweaked. We're always tinkering. Like, let's add a new IDP spot this year. Oh, let's tweak the scoring a little bit.
We've had little changes, don't get me wrong. I thought we did do waivers 1 year in there.
1 year, and then they immediately hated it and voted it back down.
Yep. And that was recently as well. But I think, I'm always go with the flow, whatever works with the group. I mean, we have our league is unique. It's with a bunch of close friends. So whatever
fights happen, friendships end. It's absolute chaos is what it is. Well, then let's talk more about general fantasy, Dan. If you were starting a keeper league today, would you model it after our league, or how do you feel about round value? Because I have very distinct feelings about round value.
I really don't have a preference. I really don't. For me, I enjoy having a variety of different fantasy rules and leagues.
Yeah, that's cool.
One of the things that's unique, I think, about our league is it allows you just to keep your players that you like. You're able to keep whoever it is. There's no round value. It doesn't go up every other year. You don't have a limit to how long you can keep someone if you truly like someone. If you get Patrick Mahomes, you can, and Travis Kelce together, maybe just never, ever let them go. I've been there too. I had Arian. I think I was the only person that ever had Arian Foster in our league.
Yeah. Wrote him from start to finish. We basically had the same thing with LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yes. So no, I think that's unique and it's fun. It's kind of like whatever works for you and your group. I don't think there's necessarily a way to run it. Whatever works for keep the league going strong is what I think you should do.
If I joined a league now and they gave me the rules of our league, I'd be like, this is fucking stupid and we should not do it this way. I'm going to go back to what Austin was saying. I like the round value. I just think there's something, Dan, to being able to eyeball these guys and take them late in a draft. Like, I don't know, Puka Nacua, who I would have never cut if there was a round value keeper attached to him. But
Yes,
I released Puka. No, I would not have. I released Puka Nacua. Dan gets him. Dan has a keeper for the rest of his life and gets to laugh at me about it. It's absolutely terrible. But Dan, you actually hit on the next thing I wanted to bring up. And I think I know your feelings on this. So you are not pro putting a limit on how long somebody could be kept, because that's something I've run into in some of my other keeper leagues. Is the one that comes to mind. I'm in an auction keeper league where not only does their price go up every year, but after 2 years, you can't even keep them anymore.
Yeah, if you do the work, whether it's researching a draft, whether it's making a trade, whether it's watching someone play and picking them up off free agency, if you do the work to get someone on your team, you should not be limited to how long you can have them on your team in a keeper or dynasty league. It should just be your player for as long as you want.
And Austin, you mentioned that there was an auction aspect to your league. Was there any term limits on keeping guys in that league?
Not in that league, but in my fantasy baseball league that I play in, it is set up that way. And it's also, so the first time you keep a player, they cost $5 more than like the value you drafted them at. And what I particularly like about that though is you're still benefiting from the value you drafted the player at. So if you drafted a player that was not going to be that people weren't going to spend a ton of money on in that draft, then you can still get value even though you're getting that $5 increase. And then it's set up so that after 2 seasons or after 2 times being kept, the player goes back to the waiver. So you can, or back into the pool. So you have up to 3 years that you can have the same player as a keeper, which I do like because, you know, in this baseball league, for example, like I want a chance at Ronald Acuna Jr. at some point, like as a Braves fan, it's just like, it's part of the deal. But I see the same thing that Dan is coming from. Like I also feel that way when it comes to keepers. And what I do think is that the thing I feel probably one of the strongly about is the fact that you should get rewarded for drafting the player at the value that you got him at, regardless of how it's set up. Like if you're in a salary cap league and you spent $5 on a player, like you should be rewarded for that because you were like, yeah, I got this player at $5. So I definitely think that that's a nice way to, you know, encourage people to do the research and do the work to go after some young players that might pop off.
Yeah. Before we recap the first 3 rounds of the draft, which are crazy important for a draft like this, I'll explain it in a second. I just want to button up the keeper talk. Austin, when you're looking at redraft and you have the same group of 10 to 12 to 14 insane people who want to hang out with each other every summer for at least a draft and then for the next 3 months of the year, do you prefer a keeper or do you prefer wiping the slate clean?
I definitely prefer keeper if the league is going to stay the same. It becomes tricky if the league isn't. But I really enjoy just the continuity from season to season and the strategy that comes with it. I think it makes the offseason a little bit more interesting because you maybe want to trade. And it's also a good way to test out, like, do you ever want to transition to a full-on dynasty league? So I think it just keeps an extra element in there. It also, what I like about it is it means that a team is never just completely irrelevant, because when you're towards the end of the season, let's say you're at the bottom of the standings, it still matters for you to pay attention because you can pick up other players and get cheap keepers that you can have, or you can trade players that other teams might want to keep and help them get in the playoffs, or trade players for keepers. Like there's just so much more activity that can happen for regardless of how well you're doing in the league. If you have a keeper set up and you're planning on just doing it with the same group over and over again.
And Dan, I think I'm correct in that your second longest running league, or it may even be tied with us, is a non-keeper redraft league where you guys start over every time. I'm not asking you to choose babies right now, but I'm asking you to make Sophie's choice. Which do you prefer, keeper league, non-keeper league, when you have the same group of guys every year, or girls?
Oh, I love keeper leagues. I think, again, I like the idea of getting rewarded when you do the work. If you know the guys and you can get them on your team and you're able to keep them, I think it makes it more fun. And also, I think it makes trades more interesting. I think you get people that want that guy and are willing to give up a lot to get him. And I just think that makes it more fun. I'm also a big proponent of being able to trade draft picks.
Yeah, that took some getting into with us. We were trading draft picks. Again, most of this league had no idea what dynasty fantasy football was when we started, but we were already trading draft picks. We were absolutely nuts. I was keeping track of it on like spreadsheets with pen and paper of what picks people had because we were playing on Yahoo, which is a wonderful interface if you're starting over every year. A terrible interface if you are doing Dynasty or any form of keeper. So yeah, absolutely fun. Loving what I'm seeing in the chat. And Gator, my weekly reminder, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. I see a bunch of you watching us over on Elon Musk's bastard love child of X. I would love if you guys would click the link that Josh put in the description that gets you right over to our YouTube page. Hit that subscribe button. It costs you absolutely nothing. We just recently hit 1,100 subscribers. We thank each and every one of you guys, and we're on our way to 2,000. We have a big event coming up for the month of August. If you've not followed Club Fantasy for a period of time, we turn our show over to the women of fantasy football come August, and we are going to be auctioning off a ton of very, very cool memorabilia, I guess raffling off, not auctioning off. And all the proceeds benefit Laura Oakman's Galvanize. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And if you hit the subscribe button, I can guarantee you will seriously not miss any of it. Guys, let's break down the first 3 rounds of this draft. And the reason I said these 3 rounds are important is I told everybody in the draft, like my home league, think about this as if you can keep 3 guys from this draft. Now, for them, I didn't specify round value or anything, so they may be looking for value later in the draft. But the first 3 picks for my home league, Dan, this looks an awful lot like a lot of the guys that we know are about to be kept. So I'm going to run down these first 3 rounds. It's going to take a little bit longer because there's 14 teams. I'm about to say 42 names, people. So we got Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Breece Hall, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Travis Etienne. I don't think there's anything particularly surprising about that first round whatsoever. Saquon Barkley, Puka Nacua, Malik Nabers, Devon Achane, Chris Olave, Drake London, Patrick Mahomes, Kieran Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Josh Allen, Sam Laporta, Devonta Smith, and Rome Odunze round out the first 2 rounds. I think there are some questions about round 2. We go back to Trey McBride, tight ends going early in this one, DK Metcalf, Jalen Hurts, quarterbacks going early, Dalton Kincaid, Lamar Jackson, Isaiah Pacheco, Nico Collins, Michael Pittman, CJ Stroud, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, feels like a really old man in the middle of all of this, Tank Dell, DJ Moore, and Zay Flowers. If you wanted to know Tank Dell's value, he just went with the, 40th pick, and you're talking about keeping him in the 18th round. Zay Flowers is the last pick of round 3. So as we look at this, before I ask you guys' opinions on round 3, we have Jersey J in the chat right now, literally destroying Dame Overboard with the first pick. And Dame, you're in the chat if you want to defend yourself. So Jersey J first says, roam over DK Metcalf. Then when he thought I was going to ignore him, a few minutes later, he says, I'm still baffled that Rome Odunze went before DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Tank Dell. It's a bad pick at 212. And then just laying in 101 is making bad wide receiver picks. Worthy over Pickens, Ayuk, T. Higgins, Hollywood, Cup. I don't know. So Jersey J, not a fan of what's going on at the 101 right now, guys. My question to you is Rome Odunze worth the 24th pick in a keeper league? Did I break this by putting Dynasty ADP? Because there are some weird picks going on right now, Dan.
So if you look at all of his picks, every one of those guys other than Christian McCaffrey is a first or second year player. I think that guy, he just likes young players. I think that's what he's looking for with what he's doing. I don't know that you broke anything with how you set it up. I think that's just his target.
And we have people like that in our league where we know, because Dan and I are super nerds who will mock draft our own league before the actual draft. And we know there are certain players who are just going to lean rookie. Is that the instance you think we're running into here, Austin? Is this just a player who wants to lean rookie when it comes to this draft?
I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I am inclined to say that this person doesn't realize it's a keeper league and not a dynasty league.
Which is fair. Could very well be the case.
It's very, very rookie heavy. And I do think that ADP is causing there to be some value where maybe it wouldn't be in a typical keeper league, like getting Keenan Allen in the 7th round.
Yeah.
That's a little bit bonkers right now. But to me, I think this brings up a really good point for draft strategy in keeper leagues. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm inclined to say you should just draft a keeper league as if it's a redraft league and sort the keeper stuff out later, worry about that down the road, and not treat it as kind of a dynasty league where you're trying to find that value in the draft. What do you guys think about that?
Interestingly enough, it's been so long since I've actually drafted for a keeper league. So I've had my 3 keepers, but what I will say is round 1, because of the fact that we don't assign round value, round 1 keeper is on my brain the entire time. Like, I'm like, if one of my keepers goes down, is this person going to be able to replace them? If this is the year that Travis Kelce breaks both of his knees and goes and becomes a house husband to Taylor Swift, do I need to be concerned? Am I going to be able to replace them with round 1? Dan, how about you?
Oh, I completely agree with Austin. I think you got to look at it this year and sort keepers out later. There are, and especially if you're talking about our home league specifically, there's so many trades and things that happen in a keeper league that there are so many opportunities to change. I mean, there are some guys in our league that never keep the same guy more than 1 year. Like, they get traded so often. And I see other leagues that are the same way. But so I agree with him. I look at it as this year. I'll sort keepers out later.
I'm going to throw Index of Sus up on the screen. Said he couldn't play keeper without thinking about the future. He thought that was the entire point. I played Dynasty without thinking about the future. I only care about winning this year. So if chasing ships is the way you want to play, there is an aspect of not so much thinking about the future. You could just go into this thing thinking, I'm not a completely shitty drafter. 3 guys are going to fall into my lap. I bet if you picked any team on here, even if not you who hates the 101, but you would be able to pick 3 guys you would keep from any team on here, whether they were thinking about the future or not. So I think there is people who could play this just to win this year. You could argue a pick like Derrick Henry in the 3rd round is a win this year pick, but I do think Derrick Henry, even in a league of this size, is still worthy of a keeper. Austin, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in fairness, I am still thinking about the future, but I'm not only drafting thinking about the future. I think the person in the first spot seems to only be thinking about the future, looking to figure out which of these guys are going to be my keepers in the year. Like if you're drafting people like Odunze ahead of DK Metcalf, Xavier Worthy ahead of George Pickens and freaking Keenan Allen, like you're more worried about like, can I get value on the keeper than can I build a good roster now? Whereas for me, like I'm going to build a good roster and then I'm going to pick my opportunities to look for the value. So if there's a player that I'm like, I don't think they're going to hit this year, I'm going to draft them later on, then great. So like a great example is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Last year, he would have been a great late round keeper league target for me because I did not think he was going to be super elite last year, and I was right. But I think this year he has a much better chance of taking that step forward. So I will still think about the future, but I'm not. That's my only consideration when I'm doing a keeper league.
I think this is a shot at me because he said every league needs a 500 manager, and Dan will attest. That's basically what I am in our home league. I have my years of success, but they are sandwiched around many, many years of mediocrity. So yes, maybe I do need to just change my strategy. Interestingly enough, my next question was, does this being a keeper league change your early draft round strategy? We've basically just thought about that for 15 minutes. So that will not be my next question. So I want to talk a little bit about draft strategy here because neither of you really did this, though. Austin, you're kind of close. Let's talk about 14 team leagues because that's something our viewers have been asking about for a while is bigger leagues because we tend to play to the common, which is 10 and 12 team leagues. You don't see many 14s, and I'm probably never going to mock an 8 just because, good Lord, we'd be talking about how great our teams are forever, and the draft would take about 4 seconds. But with a 14 team league, picking from the end could be a nightmare. Austin, when you chose the 3 spot, did that come into play at all? Because you're literally talking about 27 picks in between your picks when you're from the end.
Well, as you know, I like to use Google to tell me what my draft slot is. So it did not come into play whenever I picked my 3rd spot, but it is definitely an issue when it comes to 14 team leagues. And I will say, I'll spoil kind of recapping some of my draft in general. It is why I went ahead and grabbed an elite tight end and an elite quarterback in the 2nd and 3rd round because of how long I knew I was going to have to wait before getting to pick again.
And you guys' strategy, my questions are clearly too basic because your strategy is playing into my questions. Dan, before I have you answer, I want to address something because Dame defended himself, said it's a mock. He's also never played in an actual keeper league, and his sleeper app isn't letting him make the pick. Dame, we are going a little hard at you right now. Jersey's also going a little hard at you. This is all in good fun. We understand it as a mock, and we understand we're just here trying to help people get better. Your team seems to be the butt of the jokes, but I promise you it's nothing personal. It is just something we are having fun with. You probably haven't even made the worst pick of the draft so far. We'll get into that in a little bit later. And Jay also mentioned they didn't know it was a keeper. Still doesn't love the picks, but Andrea playing in her first 14-team league this year. So good luck. It can be an adventure. Pay attention to where the players are going in this draft, because one thing I'm noticing, quarterbacks going way early, everybody's terrified. But before we get into that, because that is one of the next things I wanted to address, Dan, let's go back to that question about picking on the ends. You've been doing this draft for 18 years now. You've won 3 championships. There are years when you have the 14th pick. It's got to feel like an eternity after you make your turn before it gets back to you.
I love it. I love being at the end and having those back-to-back picks. I'm a big fan of that. I would much rather have two really good players than be picking early, even through trades. Have a great player and then have to wait and get an average player second. I like the depth. I like getting those 2 picks at a turn.
And moving into that then, Dan, so clearly you don't have a problem with it, but let's move into the thing that is kind of jumping out to me. It's interesting, Dan, because you and I have said this for ages based on our own league, but we're kind of seeing it come to life, is you don't win a 14-team league without an elite quarterback. And we are seeing almost every team, all but 2 teams, if my eyes aren't deceiving me, have drafted their starting quarterback already. Dan, is that just something that when you know there are 14 teams, you just know you cannot wait, because you were the first one to take a quarterback, but you didn't quite start a run there?
I think, like, for me, when I took Mahomes here, it was just looking at the value of Mahomes versus the value of what was available to pick in that spot. And I just felt Mahomes' value was greater, because like Austin talked about earlier, is he's going to have to wait a whole another turn, those number of picks before he gets to pick again. Where I was looking at it and I go, and if I would have waited, I could have went with Stroud or Jackson potentially if I didn't take Mahomes and Mahomes went instead of Allen and so forth. I would much rather have Mahomes in that case, because I think I still got another really good player in Pittman in the next round.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I stood. I thought you took Mahomes just so you could make fun of me because I have Mahomes. And
Brian, my world does not revolve around you.
Well, this show revolves around me. Ask anybody who watches it.
Not everything is about you.
Austin, you don't play in our home league, but you were actually the 3rd person to take a quarterback, and you kind of touched on it already with Laporta and Hurts and why you did what you did there. But was it just the nature of the 14-team league that just drug quarterback up for you? Because having drafted with you for a while, early quarterback is not even usually something you experiment with.
Yeah, honestly, like early quarterback often for me is more of a best ball move when I'm trying to do a certain kind of roster construction and build my portfolio there. And then if I'm in a 10-team league, I rarely will go early quarterback unless like somebody just falls. Once I get to 12, it's a little bit more hit or miss. I'll still wait a little bit, but definitely above 12. I start to care more about getting an elite quarterback early, because I don't want to be the odd man out and end up with somebody that I just don't have a ton of faith in. Now, I will say, I'm saying this, and as I'm saying this, Dak Prescott is going. That's the 13th. Well, that's the 14th quarterback off the board, because I already took 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah,
and I would feel great about that if I was Philadelphia in that situation. So you can still wait. I think there's still an advantage to be had by getting one of those elite rushers that is going to have a consistent floor, just because as you have a larger league, the quarterback position ends up creating a larger proportion of your points, because the depth at the other positions isn't enough to make up the gap at times. Like you can get really down bad really quickly with the receiver and running back positions in larger leagues, and have guys that aren't the starters on their team. They might be the 4th string receiver, especially depending on roster size. So you definitely have to kind of balance that one out and decide if you're going to go quarterback early in a large league.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about this because Dak throws me for a loop here. So when I wrote down the ADP for the players I'm about to mention at quarterback, I wrote it down before I had switched the ADP to Dynasty. So I don't know if that influenced this, but I find this very interesting because I didn't know how I was going to phrase this question. I don't even really think it fits the show anymore. But I was going to say, let's just talk about quarterback value. So the ADPs for the 4 guys I'm about to mention, I want you guys to kind of like weigh these players with their ADPs and then see where they went in this draft, which is wildly different for a 14-team league. So Patrick Mahomes on average would have been going in the 3rd. Dan took him in the 2nd. This is incredible. Dak in most leagues is going in the 6th. In this league where he should be more important, he falls to the 9th. Jared Goff is typically going to the 9th and hasn't even been drafted. And Baker Mayfield, who was a viable fantasy starter last year, is going in the 12th. And I would venture a guess that the way this league is shaping up, Baker may not even end up being drafted. So, Austin, when you hear those names in their ADPs, but then look at how it played out on the board, does it change your feelings about quarterback? Would you have waited on Hurts with Dak and the fact that Jared Goff hasn't even been drafted? Or does the keeper aspect of Jalen Hurts matter so much more? And I just want to throw out there, let's say you didn't draft Jalen Hurts. You would have had Tyreek Hill, Sam Laporta, and then pick your favorite running back or wide receiver. I'll give you Derrick Henry as your 3, maybe not Derrick Henry, but somebody. Even looking at your own team, though, you have keepers. So, again, hearing the value and seeing where these guys went, does it change your feeling about quarterbacks?
Not really, just because there's still so much value to be had from the rushing element of a guy like Jalen Hurts. Now, I think I would feel differently if I had taken Jordan Love in the 5th round and could have gotten Dak Prescott in the 9th. That feels like a more comparable like for like fantasy quarterback. And I would not feel great about that value. But with the rushing upside that Jalen Hurts has, I'm totally fine paying the premium on him, and I don't feel any type of way about Dak Prescott falling. I'm also curious if the fact that the ADP is set to Dynasty is causing this kind of mismatch to happen. But overall, I'd still like if it's a rushing quarterback, if it's Allen, Hurts, Jackson, I'm still willing to take those guys in the top 3, regardless of the value that can be had at quarterback later.
And Dan, we've seen in our league, it's a 50-yard per point, much like Scott Fishbowl is this year. It's a 50-yard per point, giving rushing quarterbacks that extra value. But as the first person to take a quarterback, seeing the value, Trevor fucking Lawrence just went in the 10th round. Would that have changed like your pick, or just the fact that you can set it and forget it with Mahomes? Is that enough for you?
I like to be able to set it and forget it with Mahomes. I mean, if there were other players of like that maybe had fallen, if Chris Olave had still been there, I would have taken Olave in that spot. I don't love Ayuk. I don't trust Waddle. There was nobody else there. I didn't come into this thinking I'm taking Mahomes in the 2nd round. It was just about looking at the board, how it fell, and who I felt had the most value in the 2nd round at that point.
Perfect. And I'll give you time to talk about your team, obviously, at the end of the show. As we're wrapping up the draft, I wanted to let folks know that these guys will break down their teams. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the second half of the draft here in just a minute. But the last thing I want to do is Austin's favorite part of the show, and that is our keep, trade, cut question. And I've decided to deem this week's episode the wide receivers Ryan hates. And before I get into the wide receivers I hate, I wanted to point out I do not hate this person. I was a little shocked to see Brandon Ayuk go in the 2nd round. I feel like I should give that more attention with his holdout. It's just strange to me. That feels very early with Brandon Ayuk, and we don't even know where he could end up playing next year. But he is not a wide receiver I hate. However, there are 3 that I don't care for. And in ADP, they are all going within 1 round of each other. Here, it got different. And it got different again, I think, because I picked Dynasty. But the 3 wide receivers I'm going to make you guys keep, trade, cut, and you could cut all 3 if it were up to me, are Malik Nabers, Michael Pittman, and Stefon Diggs. And keep in mind, I do not hate players. I hate ADPs. And I think these guys are all currently being overdrafted, even in a keeper league. Dan, you took one of these guys, but I always make Austin answer first. So Malik Nabers, Michael Pittman, and Stefon Diggs in a keeper league, Austin. Keep, trade, cut.
Can I play in leagues with you, Ryan? Because I don't know what's going on with your take
It's
here.
fun, man. I highly recommend it.
First of all, Austin plays in leagues with me, and in the one redraft league we play in together, I won in year 1, he won in year 2. So
Yep, accurate. And I'm gonna win 3. So
There you go.
Okay, so this is fairly straightforward for me. I think I'm keeping Michael Pittman. Love the PPR value there. Love the setup in Indy. I'm going to trade Malik Nabers because I think he has the better trade value.
Well, yeah, he's going in the fucking second round of a keeper league. I'd say he has the most value right now. So.
Yeah, but not because I think he's the better player. I think Stefon Diggs is more value, is better at his ADP currently. And so I end up cutting Stefon Diggs by default. But I would say if we took Pittman out of this, I would keep Stefon Diggs over Malik Nabers.
Okay. But Diggs is the odd man out, and I think that makes sense. Dan, you drafted Michael Pittman, so I have a feeling your answer might be the exact same. Do we think Malik Nabers, the rookie, has more trade value than the name recognition of Stefon Diggs, or am I even right about your answer?
I know. I mean, so Pittman. I was more shocked. You were a big Pittman guy last year. For you to be hating on him now is crazy to me. You're such a flip flopper.
It's ADP. First of all, I do not hate players. I hate draft position. I don't like where he's going, and I don't think they're going to throw the ball enough.
You just wait, Ryan. When we do our DFS podcast every week in cash games,
remind me about my
Michael
hate
Pittman.
of these guys. Yeah,
as you should. I would keep Pittman. I would actually trade Diggs and cut Nabers.
Okay.
The Giants, to me, seem like a mess. I'm avoiding all New York Giant football players from any fantasy teams for me. I think Nabers will be a fine pro down the road. I just don't. Daniel Jones spent the whole offseason, are they going to draft a quarterback? Am I going to be the guy? Oh, by the way, I'm rehabbing from a torn ACL. They just seem like they're a mess. I just don't. I think he'll be fine down the road. I understand this is a keeper league. He might have value going into next year. I think you'll get more value. I mean, you get those guys that just love rookies, so maybe does have value. But I think you can get more out of Diggs. So I would trade Diggs and cut Nabers.
Most of the chat agrees with you as they are pouring fire on the Giants' grave right now. However, I got the wrong person up. Jersey J says blasphemy. They are defending the Giants right now. So I imagine you're probably close to Rutherford in Jersey. Your two teams, the Jets and the Giants, you obviously went blue there, and not working out real well for you. I promise I don't always like to do this, but it's been happening so much because the next player I want to talk about is a player that you guys drafted. So Dan, I'm going to start off with you. Are you buying into the Jameson Williams hype that we're seeing? So looking at the second half of the draft, Austin was able to get Jameson Williams with the 8-12. And so for a former first-round wide receiver heading into his third year, traditionally a breakout year for wide receivers in the NFL, but we haven't seen it from Jameson Williams, but the hype is certainly there right now, Dan. How are we feeling about JMO?
I like him. I hope he does well. I don't see it. I don't see their offense, feeding a second receiver top tier enough for him to have like a third year breakout for receiver. I also think that really good receivers anymore, they don't get to that third year. They have a breakout, most of them in the first year, maybe a few in the second year. So I don't buy into it. I've also that person who thought last year was going to be the year and bought into him, and it blew up my face. So maybe I'm just bitter about that. But I'm avoiding him. I think him and I are divorced. I'm not friends with him on social media anymore.
Austin, can you talk him into it? Was this a pick of convenience? Was there just nobody else there? You have probably the oldest wide receiver in the NFL, Keenan Allen, and then some young hotness, Jameson Williams, but backing him up there. So
yeah, I think I took like the three oldest with Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen. It was more so like I didn't love any of the running backs there. It felt like I was in the running back dead zone at that point. And of the receivers that were going around that ADP, he was my favorite. And I thought, you know what? He's that at that point in the draft, I was filling up my bench. So it was kind of just like, sure, I'll stash him on the bench. And if he pops off, then great. If not, okay, I have plenty of other players that'll start, or I can drop him, pick up what I need at some point. So it was more so just where he was, the value in the draft, not necessarily betting on upside. I'm like cautiously optimistic about his season. I've enjoyed drafting him in best ball leagues for the potential upside he has, because they've got to find somebody besides Amon-Ra St. Brown and that offense. And Sam Laporta helped fill that role last year. But once teams figure out how to defend the middle of the field against Detroit, they need a guy that can stretch the field, and that's going to be Jameson Williams. So there is some hope. There's a vision there for him to get more usage. But I'm not necessarily like going to go out of my way or draft him way ahead of ADP to get that.
All right. And before I have you guys start breaking down your teams, the last question I want to ask you guys, Dan, are you a little surprised at the non-value, if you will, surrounding the rookie running backs? I know none of them were very highly touted. We saw Jonathan Brooks go at the 5'9", but then we saw a deep fall to everybody else. Trey Benson goes in the 7th round. Blake Corum goes in the 8th round. Jalen Wright goes all the way down in the 10th round. Our experience with our leagues is people do tend to latch onto those rookies. I don't know that even these rookie running backs would get out of, I guess the best way to put it would be the 6th round of our draft, because our 3 keepers would be the first 3 rounds. So Jonathan Brooks is the only one who kind of falls where I think a lot of these rookies would go. Dan, are you surprised to see nobody latching on to rookie running backs?
I'm not. I think a lot of them went to rough situations. There was no rookie running back other than Brooks that went to a situation where he could potentially be playing a significant role this year, barring an injury. And some of these guys I thought were really, really good college running backs. I love Corum. Bo Allen from Wisconsin went to the Jets to sit behind Hall. There's just bad situations surrounding them this year. I just don't think that they are going to hold the value to go earlier in the drafts like a normal running back year would have a couple go.
And Austin, same question. I guess my question would be, I know you're following the Panthers as it stands for your other writing gig. Is there a running back other than Jonathan Brooks that should be creeping up? Gator J mentions he likes the spot for Marshawn Lloyd, but Marshawn Lloyd obviously stuck behind Josh Jacobs. For redraft, everybody but Brooks does feel stuck behind. Is there one you expect to pop off that you would expect to go higher by the time we get to full-on draft season later on?
No, I mean, I fully agree with what Dan was saying. There's some guys that I'll take some dart throws on in case injuries happen later in drafts, but you have to get to the point where there's not clear starters for me to start to feel that way. Like, I think the guy in LA, the Arizona running back, I'm forgetting their names right now.
Benson and Corum.
Yes, Blake Corum in LA, Trey Benson in Arizona. Those are some guys I think could have some chances, but they kind of need some injuries to get there. And there's a good chance that they both get some starts, but they're not going to be perennial everyday starters. I think they're going to be major fab costs whenever that time does eventually come. But there's no rookie running back I'm feeling super drawn towards this year. Even Jonathan Brooks, I'm not like I have to go get him. I'd rather just spend my running back picks elsewhere.
No, I think that's fair. Guys, we have reached the point in the show where I'm going to let these guys break down their drafts. I'm actually going to take us off the screen because Austin's last pick is hidden. So I promise you we're still here. You just can't see our faces. Dan, I always let the guests go first. I have your team highlighted. Oh, I don't have your team highlighted because I'm on the wrong screen. Now I have your team highlighted. So Dan, my basic questions are, you don't have to break down all 12 of your picks. Did you have a strategy coming in where you shocked players fell to you? Are there any players on your team that you didn't get a chance to talk about while we were talking about the draft?
I don't go into a draft with any specific strategy. I think if you go in saying I have to get these players, and then someone else gets them before you, it just messes with you. You go in and you try to force things. I think you gotta let it flow and let's see how it falls to you. If you'd asked me when I picked,
this feels like a personal attack, Dan. This feels like a personal attack. I go in with players.
Not everything is about you, Ron. If you would have told me when I picked I was going to pick 8th for this mock draft that Justin Jefferson was going to fall to me, I would have laughed at you. No way. Yeah. But here we are, Justin Jefferson. That'd be great in any draft if I can go pick 8th and have him fall. That's us, man. I actually really liked my team and the way it fell. Kind of rolled the dice on Nick Chubb getting healthy there, but after watching him squat 750 pounds the other day, I think I feel pretty good that he'll be back playing pretty early in the season. I think getting Chase Brown, I think that could be a steal late, and your favorite Cole Kmet.
I wouldn't have had a problem with Cole Kmet except that you drafted 2 tight ends. You're heavy on my oops of the draft, but we'll get to that in a little bit later.
Ooh, I look forward to that.
There's one other person I'm going to pick on instead of you, but the 2 tight end, 2
bring
quarterback build. The 2 tight end, 2 quarterback build, but I actually want to give credit to a 2 quarterback build later. Anybody else on this team, Dan?
I think getting Kyle Pitts where I got him, I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Austin, let's bounce over to you. You know the deal. I don't need to explain it to you.
Yeah. So first off, I think next time we do this, we need to have index of suspicion, have like a little like just tab on the screen where their chat just continuously goes up because they've been cracking me up the entire time.
I was going to throw something out here. Index of suspicion. We love to have some of our drafters on the show with us. Shoot me a DM either on Sleeper or Twitter at the Fantasy 5. You'll see it under my name when I put myself back on the screen. If you are not adverse to coming on camera, you are killing the chat right now. And I think we could work on maybe getting you on the show with us. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But regardless, Austin, go.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to head off your whole 2 tight end, 2 quarterback bullshit because
you did it too.
Team.
Jesus. Yeah. So hold on. Let me talk about one thing first because I think it's what you're going to talk about. So my initial oops of the draft was actually going to be our good friend Index of Sus. We're going Stroud and then 3 rounds later going Jaden Daniels. But Dan, I thought about our league and we saw a guy last year keep. Who was it? Josh Allen and why am I forgetting Taylor's other keeper? It was 2 quarterbacks.
It was Fields.
Well, yeah, there's a whole nother thing there. So it didn't quite work out, but it worked out for what I'm about to describe. He was able to trade Josh Allen for a haul to help make his team better going into the season. And so before I was about to jump on Index of Sus, I was like, you know what? This is actually a perfect pick in a league like this because you have Stroud. You're not worried about bye weeks. What you're worried about is somebody who took Justin Herbert, Duarte over here on the end. And if Herbert isn't living up to expectations in this new run first offense, all of a sudden Jaden Daniels becomes a very valuable pick to Duarte, especially in a keeper league. So I was going to give Index of Sus shit for the 2 quarterback build. I thought better of it, Austin. I just wanted to bust balls about drafting 2 of each, which I didn't realize you did as well. I will now turn the floor back over to you, Mike.
Yeah, which I did 2 of as well because I don't want to have to deal with waivers if I don't have to later in the season. In the 14 team in a 14-team league, especially, that's where I feel like the waivers in 14-team leagues are awful. Anytime once you get past 12, there's nobody available on the waivers. I hate it every time. So I just am getting my bye week situation sorted out early on in the year, so I don't even have to ever worry about it. Yeah, Will Levis probably put an event available on waivers, but I don't want to think about it. And honestly, like, who is I going to take instead? Bucky Irving? Like, he's not going to do anything for my roster. He's just there to fill out the roster. I'm not like, at that point, it's just like, let me get a player that might actually help me win a week, which I think Will Levis could when Jalen Hurts has off week. Outside of that, I continue to try and wait on running backs in drafts, and I was a little bit nervous to do it in this draft because of the 14-team nature. But I still ended up with David Montgomery and Aaron Jones as my 2 running backs. I feel great about that. I don't feel great about not having any running backs, so I
was just going to say, you have 2 running backs in a 14-team league, and you have to start 2 of those bad boys. So.
Yeah, I feel good about these 2, though.
Yeah.
And hey, if Jameson Williams pops off, maybe somebody else will want to trade with me. You know, like. And that's the other thing is I picked players that I thought had the most value where I didn't just pick a running back in the 11th and 12th round because I was like, well, I only have 2. I was like, well, no, I think Luke Musgrave is a better player than any of these other running backs available, like particularly the ones that never see the field, like J.K. Dobbins. And at that point, I was just like, I'm going to draft for value and I'll deal with the positional stuff later. It kind of flies in the face of me not wanting to deal with waivers. But it's like I'd rather wait for a running back to get hurt and get their backup on waivers than have to guess which tight end is going to score a touchdown, which tight end is going to be ranked outside of the top 15 is going to score a touchdown during my 1 bye week.
Well, not only that, it's like you're talking about 12th round picks here. I mean, yeah, you have something better to complain about than that, Ryan.
Oh, and that's fair. Austin should have gotten some backup running backs. Now I will give you like Bucky Irvin, but there is a player because let's get to my oops of the draft. I wasn't paying attention. This was an auto pick. And now that I see who it was, I think it actually may have been an auto pick. And I am going to bitch about a 12th round pick, Dan.
Oh my God.
Audric Estime ahead of Jaleel McLaughlin is criminal to me. If you have paid attention to the drumbeat coming out of Denver, Jaleel McLaughlin has the potential to play over Javonte Williams, who went into the 6th round of this draft. And now we are taking Audric Estime, who by all accounts is still behind Samaje Perine, who may not have a job with the Denver Broncos. And I just think Jaleel McLaughlin this late in this draft for the value he may have, Austin would have fit perfectly with your team ahead of Luke Musgrave or Will Levis. If you take McLaughlin in the 11th and then take either one of those two in the 12th, I feel way less worse about your team. So my oops of the draft is just letting Jaleel McLaughlin fall that far. I don't think we need to pay more attention. And again, that may have been an auto pick, and I may be busting balls for literally no good reason, but shit happens. It's what I do. It's all in good fun. Jaleel McLaughlin, folks, pay attention to the name. I think he's going to be very, very good this season. Guys, that's the end of the draft. Daniel, thank you so much for your annual visit to Mock It Like It's Hot.
Thanks for having me. Love it.
I know you don't have any work your own to promote unless anybody wants to come and support you as a school administrator. But any websites out there that you follow that you think not enough people pay attention to while you're on Twitter?
Listen, the only ones I follow are you guys. I saw what they did for you, Ryan. So I say it every year. Before you got on this show, you had 0 playoff wins in our league. And now look at you. You have a championship one. I mean, that's fair. I mean, that's the biggest promo. You guys should be promoting this all the time. Look what Ryan Weisse has done since he joined Club Fantasy Football.
Dan, the best hype man in the business, folks. Austin.
Yeah, just to pile on the Ryan train. Ryan hates Michael Pittman, loves Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah.
That's why we
100%.
make him better, folks.
And if you want more of my great advice,
no, but you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. We have our best ball show continuing on. We had a week off while Matt and I were on vacation, but tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., summer school will be back. We're talking about how to draft wide receivers in best ball leagues, focused a little bit on Underdog and DraftKings, kind of those tournament settings. But we venture a little bit outside of that. And we'll be breaking down all the week 17 matchups. Those will start releasing, I think, next week. We got to record some more, so still got some work to do on that. But you can also find all of my Carolina Panthers content at Last Word on NFL.
Yeah, Club Fantasy going full into best ball. Our own Gator J, who hosts our other mock draft show, released a beginner's guide today and already has a second article that I'll probably be releasing tomorrow morning. So best ball galore with Austin, Gator J, Matt Record. So much great stuff going on here at Club Fantasy. Why haven't you subscribed yet? Hopefully you have. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Help us get a little bit better. We literally have 9 shows every week, and I may have miscounted. We probably have 10 now, but we have 9 at least every single week. We cover everything: redraft, dynasty, best ball, and then we do mock drafts to help you get better. We have 3 different mock draft shows. If you're tired of seeing my ugly face, we have a mock draft show hosted by women on Thursday nights, Mock Girl Summer from Women of Fantasy Football. We even have a golf DFS show, though they are about to go on hiatus, so I suppose I can remove that from the show sheet for a little while. There is no reason for you not to subscribe. The next time you will catch us live, Austin, you are not live. You pre-record, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you will not catch us live tomorrow, but you will catch the Best Ball Show tomorrow. You will catch Dynasty After Party on Sunday, and then the new Mocking with the Stars with Gator J and Chris is Monday nights. Guys, we're here to help you get through this summer. We have our rankings up on the website along with a ton of articles. We've covered almost all 32 NFL teams. And yes, please, Zion, promote your network. We're at the end of the show, so if you don't get it in there very quickly, I'm not going to be able to help you out with that. But as I was mentioning, we've covered almost all 32 NFL teams. I believe we only have 3 articles left to publish where we break down a specific player from each team on top of every other fantasy relevant player with a blurb at the end of the article. All can be found on clubfantasyffl.com. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you at the next mock draft. Have a good night.